Bart Crabtree, and this is Zena Crenshaw. She's from Atlanta with the National Forum on Judicial Accountability. And you've all met Zena now. She came all the way up from Atlanta, Georgia. So anyway, I want to introduce you to Zena, and she's going to present things for us here.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for attending our first community forum on judicial accountability in the great state of Montana. I am co-administrator of the National Forum on Judicial Accountability, and already we've been talking, and what we all have in common, I think, is something with regard to the courts. Some of us have emphasis on prosecutors, might be a social work with child protective services, but at some point our paths crossed in a courtroom, and we had a judge that had to resolve a legal difficulty, and it brought forth a concern about the operation of our judicial system in this country, and maybe specifically in your state here, Montana. And Bart, when you said we just started communicating 8 or 9 months ago, I was like, really? It seems like we've been friends for ages. Thank you so much for putting this meeting together. Thank you on behalf of the National Forum on Judicial Accountability, which encourages citizens across the country to conduct these community forums on judicial accountability. We have a standard video, which I'll let you see. I want to get into the specifics of that. It should hopefully explain what we're focused in on at the National Forum on Judicial Accountability. But I will say, to sort of set the scene, that these community meetings are so important. For some reason, we pay a lot of attention to what happens in our other branches of government, on the federal level, our president elections, Congress, and then on the state level, governor elections. Maybe some people pay attention to what's happening with their state legislators. But what happens in our courtrooms should be just, our citizens of this country, average citizens, should be just as concerned about the operation of our federal and state courts as we are with any other branch of government, because some very important policy decisions are being made. Sure, it might be in the context of just one individual versus another individual, or a company versus another company, but they're still making decisions about how our country operates, who should win, who should lose. There are a lot of public policy implications, and we're just not paying enough attention to it unless it's some major media event, and then we may hear about what's happening in court. Well, the National Forum on Judicial Accountability is about just creating more awareness, and we may do it, some of it is through compulsive activity. For example, we want to enhance civics education and let our high school students know about what happens in courts. And then you hear about our citizens panel on judicial misconduct. If you are, it's like being brought in for jury duty, but what we're trying to envision is that these citizens panels would consider allegations of judicial misconduct. Bart, what did you say is the name of the commission that does it now for the state of Montana?
Oh, the Judicial Standards Commission.
Yes, the judicial. So NFOJA, that's short for National Forum on Judicial Accountability. We anticipate that those, what is it again? The
Judicial Standards Commission.
Judicial Standards Commission. My hard drive, I'm caught up with so many facts, it just dumps information at will. We anticipate that these citizen panels on judicial misconduct will replace these commissions, and this is a first step, this meeting, to organize for that, and we believe it's consistent with the Constitution and is within our powers as private citizens to conduct these citizen panels as an independent branch of the legislature. Judicial accountability is a concept that may be anything from boring to infuriating, to average citizens. What we hope what happens at the end of this meeting is you may still think it's boring, and you probably still be infuriated if you were infuriated when you got here. But we want everybody to leave thinking this is important. What I found is that people who, come on in, and grab an agenda. I'm just doing the opening opening comments. People who get concerned about the courts, unfortunately, a lot of times is when they experience some miscarriage of justice. When, you know, when they don't think that they got a fair and impartial resolution of their case. And then it's like they're focused on one judge who you know, may have seemed unethical, seemed unethical. Or maybe, you know, then they hate judges or they hate lawyers. But you notice our organization is called Judicial Accountability, not the accountability of one judge or accountability of a couple of judges. It's the judicial system. And you know, it really just occurred to me coming here to make more emphasis about this point, because if you have a case, if you feel a judge has been unfair to you, you may have lost a lot as a result. You may have lost custody of your children. I've encountered through these meetings people who have lost like 6 or 7 children. I mean, good people, and it just had their children, whole family removed from them. And I'm like, my mouth is just wide open, because I don't even understand how they're just standing there functioning when you have something like that happen. But a lot of people I want to get relief, I want to get individual relief, and I believe that we should get individual relief. I'm not one of those people that says, well, let's do this so we can make the world a better place for everybody else. I'm like, let's make the world a better place for everybody else, and let's get made whole at the same time. But what we have to understand is if we just focus in on individuals and don't understand how the judicial system responds and makes allowances for the accountability of a judge, then that's when we encounter these obstacles that we didn't anticipate and end up finding out judges at times, even when there's blatant misconduct from our perspective, we're not able to hold them accountable. And I'm suggesting is that's because we don't do enough focusing on the judicial system, the system, right, and how it operates, and what's in place to make sure that it functions properly. So I won't belabor that point, but after I've been doing this on a full-time basis, on a national basis, since 2005, and I've had people show impatience because they see these efforts as, oh, that's in the long term. You know, I need a relief now. I'll worry about, you know, the long term later. But hopefully people are starting to understand that if we've got to do them simultaneously, address the long term and the short term. Another thing is that we give the unethical people, the ethically challenged people in the legal establishment, the impression that we're not prepared to go the long haul. Then we create incentives for them to just stall, delay. You know, we might work up 100,000 people for some big protest, and they just will table things until eventually it's just me and Bart there, and then they rule against us. So we need to, if we're going to tackle these issues, we need to be prepared to make clear that we're not just here about some individual instance. We're here because we're concerned about how our government operates, and that includes our judiciary. Now, we'll figure out how much of that resonated with each of you all based on your questions and comments. But there are a couple of things I want to get across. We talked about balance of power and imbalances of power. I want to emphasize that when you're in a court proceeding, there are a variety of ways to question or challenge the outcome, the judicial outcome. You can, of course, they have hearing motions, post-trial motions. You can go up on appeal. If you think that the judge has been unethical, you can take a complaint to whatever disciplinary body your state has in place. You can go to your legislator and complain. Maybe you suggest that a judge needs to be impeached. You could go to a prosecutor and complain, a state or federal prosecutor, and complain that there was criminal conduct on the part of a judge. And this includes administrative proceedings. You could go to the president, you can go to the governor and talk in terms of their priorities for proper government function, including the courts. What happens is that in each of those scenarios, we're not satisfied with the outcome of a judicial experience, we go back to judges, or we go to people whose career, their personal life, or their professional life is substantially influenced by judges. Prosecutors are regulated by judges. A judge can substantially impact a prosecutor's effectiveness with regard to criminal cases. The judges usually regulate the prosecutor, so they can have the prosecutors removed from the legal profession. With legislators, a lot of them are judges, and a lot of them are lawyers. All lawyers are regulated by the judiciary, one way or another. So, not only if you go to a prosecutor or you're going someone who may perhaps is personally regulate their ability to make a living as a lawyer is affected by judges, the judges make a determination as to the legislation that they propose, whether it's constitutional, whether it's enforceable or not. So judges have substantial influence over these private legislators. Even with regard to the executive branch and the governor's branch, look at the tension between the courts and President Trump. There's a direct monitoring of his executive activities, and he's repeatedly being shut down by judicial rulings. So they're either directly or indirectly, judges basically control every avenue of government that we have to evaluate their conduct. Everyone, directly or indirectly. And even when it's indirect, that's substantial power. And legislators and other branches of the government, they're quite cognizant of the influence that a judge could have on things that they're trying to accomplish. Not to mention, with regard, if you go to private nonprofit organizations, it's been our constituents' experience that you go to an organization that has 7, 8-figure budgets, and they have certain issues. They do great work within the context of certain issues. Unfortunately, with our constituents, a lot of their legal difficulties are too messy to fit within that limited context. And so, there's no organized advocacy on behalf of these individuals, except for organizations like ours.